Question tonight, can you actually measure the emotional outpouring in a worldwide crisis?
Sometimes scientists think that they have done just that. Their machines and computers found a bizarre pattern right after several global disasters.
This was an experiment in which researchers placed dozens of random number generators around the world and analyzed their data to see if they could discover anything about global or collective consciousness.
On September 11th, a few hours before the first plane struck, this network of random number generators became more coherent, less random and more coherent.
It may sound bizarre, but Dr. Nelson and his team have been at this for the better part of a decade. The first spike showed up in 1997 with the death of Princess Diana. Other events like the Concorde crash, the Madrid train bombing, and the Pope's funeral all registered on those random number generators. But early on the morning of September 11, the data went off the charts.
The odds of this being a coincidence is less than 1 in 100 billion. This shows there is a deep relationship between collective consciousness and the physical world.
Hey, Inspired Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. It's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Tuesday, April Fools, April 1st, 2025. Out of the Matrix into Prime Reality. Thank you for joining us on X Rumble and YouTube for a Forbidden Science show. Literally, you know, when you are when you're researching a lot, you realize very quickly which subjects are being pushed and very present on the internet and information is readily available, and what subjects are deleted from the internet. And this is one of them. That's why I call it a forbidden science. We talked yesterday, you know, about the sort of the constant pushing for more conflict, more war, especially around Russia, Ukraine, Europe, and whatnot, and what we can actually do about it. And this show is literally explaining what we can do about it and why this has been hidden from us for such a long time. So we're going to talk about something that I call the field effect, and it has many names, but the names do not really matter. This science is being kept from us and hidden from the mainstream and the books and everything because it is being used against us. The principle of this are being used against us every day. And so I want to do a deep dive with you all on this here. There's a strong statement I'm going to make. It only takes the square root of 1% of a population meditating or praying in sync to reduce violence, crime, and even war. And it's been measured in cities, countries, and even war zones. Yes, this is real. And yes, it's been scientifically verified over 50 times. Think of human consciousness as an invisible field. When groups of people tune their minds and hearts to a peaceful, coherent state, for example, via meditation or prayer, they generate a ripple effect, one that measurably reduces social disorder in their surroundings. It's observable and it's measurable, and it works without touching a single person outside of the group. Now, when you tell this to someone, when you are in a conflict resolution meeting, mediation, when you are at a meeting that talks about violence in a city, that talks about greater violence like a war zone, conflicts and whatnot, nobody wants to listen to this. Literally, all they want is strategic solutions on who to activate and what message and what signal to send and how to put on more pressure and apply more pressure and apply more pressure. And while we are in this, you know, sort of extreme information era where so much is being pushed out, specifically through this new alternative mainstream media that has sort of captured the minds and hearts of the awakening movement, none of this is really being talked about. And this is the real sad part, because once people see the evidence and they see that it's been proven over and over again, It won't be that so hard to believe. But why is it so hard to believe? Because of instead of change the system and people get better, what we're saying is change the field and the systems begin to change themselves. And that is literally the truth. Now, that doesn't mean we're talking against doing stuff in the physical world. We're actually huge advocates for that. But like we always say, who we are while we are creating change is what matters most. Media, academia, politics do not want you to know this. Their masters do not want you to know this because it's the end of their control systems. And what do? How do they capture consciousness and make it do something for them? Well, they hold the huge megaphones, right? They have the ability to control the flow of information to a large degree. So what do? They capture our consciousness, our awareness, to project the kind of energy, the kind of emotional energy, the kind of frequency and vibration that they want projected. If it were a good thing that they wanted to project, it would be, but it's not. We're seeing more chaos, more violence, more depression, more everything. But here's the thing. It can be easily changed, very, very easily. You might have heard of some of these experiments, and actually successful ones, like the Jerusalem experiment. The interesting thing is it's very hard to find information about that. I remember a time when the internet was kind of full of this, but in their tactics, they've deleted a lot of it. And that's in 1983. It was during the Lebanon War. Meditators gathered during intense violence, and terrorist incidents, crime, and ER visits dropped up to 70%. It was repeated 7 times with similar results. Now, these were experienced meditators, but they were everyday people. They checked into a hotel, they gathered there, and they didn't really talk to each other. They didn't send out any messages to the environment, no protests, no demonstrations, no pleas, none of that. They meditated. They didn't pray for peace. They meditated. They created a field, a heart coherence that influenced the field positively and created an atmosphere, literally an atmosphere of peace that then, rippled into the environment around them and brought down the tension significantly, brought down violence significantly. None of this is complicated. None of this is complicated. Imagine if only we were to teach our children meditation and prayer properly, rather than a million of the stupid things that they get taught today at a very young, from the beginning, if you will. What change we could bring to the world. I've talked about this at length. We did a whole show on this one, the miracle of Washington, D.C. in 1993. And everybody thought this was not going to work. And 4,000 transcendental meditators gathered. I've shared this many times. Crime dropped 23.3% on average over 6 weeks. You know that's a huge number. That is a huge number for a city that is, for all intents and purposes, very engulfed in evil and has been for a very long time. If you are familiar with the literal swamp of DC and what's going on behind the scenes and underneath the scenes, if you will, it's a very, very, very dark and violent place. Yet what was measurable was a significant drop. Significant. They thought, like always during these months, that things were going to heat up, but they really cooled down, which is an incredible thing. And we are not only talking about the effect that people have on the environment as they gather together. We're also talking about the effect as those who are experiencing the field, right? There's two sides to look at this. I'm both actually influencing the field, and at the same time, I'm experiencing the field. And you might have experienced it oftentimes where all of a sudden you feel anxious or sad, a weird heaviness, even though you are actually in a good place in your life or everything is going well, but there's a weird, inexplicable heaviness. This could be because there's a strong field around you that has negative effects on you. You might have these intuitions, premonitions before things happen, and you already react to it. And as a matter of fact, there are many people who are studying this from various standpoints. One guy named Cliff High, who's developed this method over years and decades, where he is literally able to look at unexpected word and language patterns, and he's developed these tools and crawlers who literally monitor the output on the internet. And he says there are spikes in language and emotional language that are out of place. And so the way that he describes it is there will be a conversation about a subject, and then phrases or language is used that is highly unusual in the context. And what he says, what really happens is that people, that everybody's psychic, and to varying degrees, they can tap into that. But people are tapping into this, something that might happen in the future, and are beginning to express it unknowingly through words and emotional language that's out of place. And so he's been able to predict through that events that were to come, crashes and crises, for example. And he's continually doing that. If you want to look him up, Cliff High. But that's just one way of how this is actually being measured and observed, which means that our consciousness, our awareness is able to pick up on things before they actually happen, which is kind of an incredible concept. And there was this pre-sentiment experiment that has also been repeated many times, where they measured heart and brain activity. They connected them, and then they put people in front of a screen, and that screen was connected to a random image generator. And those images were either violent or they were sexually arousing, various qualities. And what they found out is that they could measure the reaction of the observer when they were presented with an image. Of course you could that. Like if I'm going to sit in front of a screen and randomly some shocking image appears, I'm going to have a reaction to it, right? My heart rate's probably going to spike. There's going to be a little bit of adrenaline. There might be some brain activity that's out of the ordinary. What was so out of the ordinary about that experiment was that they were able to measure these reactions before the person was shown the image, up to 7 seconds before. So they were sitting in front of a black screen, and they already had a reaction to an image that hasn't appeared yet, and it was randomized, so those images weren't somehow controlled. And they repeated that often, the pre-sentiment experiment, which tells us what? We pick up on things, and our consciousness and awareness is able to already see things that are coming our way. But what we so often do not take into account is that we can also use it to create a new future, literally counteract the potential that's out there. And like we said earlier, there's this project, the Global Consciousness Project. And before I go into it, I want to play you this clip that goes a little deeper in what they found with the measurements around 9/11. Let's watch this here together.
It was as I sometimes think of it, it was a shredding of the social contracts. We tore up something that everybody believes is in place. It was just destroyed. So, of course, there was also the destruction of the towers and all of that. And anyway, there was no question in my mind what would be synchronized emotions, fear and anger and anguish, and then gradually it would shift into things like compassion and sadness and a kind of hopeful attempt to somehow make sense of it. All of that. In any case, there would be millions and millions and millions of people all synchronized. So we set up the tests and found that the data were indeed not normal random data, but instead had structure. And we did a lot of analysis, eventually just learned that structured changes in the data, those persisted for about 3 days. And most of the time when something changes in our data, it's a little blip. But this was 3 days of persistent difference from the expected behavior. And we looked at different measures, and they all showed some kind of serious change. So in the middle of this graph are the events of the day of 9/11. The first plane hitting the tower, the second plane hitting another tower, the attack in Washington, and then the buildings collapsing. All that is in a little period of time here. This red curve shows what the eggs, we call them, the Global Consciousness Project Network data were doing. Normal for quite a few hours. And then at 4 a.m, which is about 4.5 hours before the first plane hit, this changed, became very, very highly deviant, and continued to be deviant until 11 or 12 o'clock, at which time all those events were finished. And then the same trace dropped just as fast as it had gone up. So we have a kind of mountain of data here in the surrounding the event. It begins before the events nominally. And we don't have a real explanation for that, unless it's that a global consciousness might have premonitions. And this was a terrible event. It led to historical changes in the way in the world. So it would not be surprising if there is a global consciousness that it could have a premonition about this terrible event.
There you go. It always helps when you unmute yourself. And none of this is really surprising anymore, but I've been we've been diving into this for many years now. What is really surprising is how hidden this data is from the public at large, how much this is being poo-pooed on by mainstream science, and of course, the implications of this actually hitting mass awareness. And if you think about it, it makes all the sense in the world that, more and more attention is being funneled into ever fewer channels. Like, even if you think about it, that we had TV previously as a primary source of information before the age of internet, it was radio and TV, and those were, supposedly many independent channels, which were, more and more bundled under the ownership of fewer and fewer companies. And we know Project Mockingbird, we know all of these things that synchronized media output. But the why is, it's not so much about just controlling information. That's one thing. Why do you need to control information? You need to control perception, which then controls consciousness, right? And the idea is to keep it at not totally low, but low enough, right? To keep it low enough so it doesn't get into creative states where we begin to actually use it to create rather than use it to react to what we see and react in predictable ways. So this Global Consciousness Project actually showed a few really interesting things, and how it was done. So what they found is that emotions and thoughts generate subtle but measurable effects on both local and global fields, which is really important. Both. It's not just where you are having an effect on everything. And large-scale coherence, people collectively feeling or focusing on the same thing, generates field coherence. So this has nothing to do with whether it's what we perceive to be positive or negative. It goes both ways. the field affects physical systems. This was the big one. Random number generators, when spread across the planet, start producing non-random outputs during moments of collective focus or emotional shock. Well, what is a random number generator? It's a machine. It's a machine that has a computer program that is instructed to do certain things, right? To randomly generate numbers. And so it does that until something happens that captures the consciousness of many people. And then it goes into more coherent states all over the world. So those number generators have, instead of random, more non-random number generations, and they measure this over and over again. Well, what's the positive, the positive message here? That technology cannot function fully independently of human consciousness. And I would go as far as to say that if we can get into a more coherent state, if we can synchronize more at a higher level, that technology could not possibly rule us or do something against us. I mean, this is a hypothetical and this is a hypothesis that I have, but I do believe that if we can raise collective consciousness above a certain level, that technology ceases to be a major problem for us, which it is right now. Right now, it's the biggest threat because we are not there in the collective consciousness. And as a matter of fact, that's what it's used to prevent. It's used to prevent us from getting there. And all of the problems that are being presented to the public right now, the world problems and all the solutions are so far off. They're so far off from the truth. And that's intended. None of these problems talk about the root cause. The root cause is who we are, collectively speaking, at what level we vibrate, and what our true frequency is that we emit into the world. That is the root problem. And if you want to talk less scientific and more human, the root problem really is that the beings or the inverted consciousness that is constantly manipulating us has discovered a long time ago that when they inflict huge pain on us, the earlier the better in our lives, when we're toddlers or small children, that serves as a lifelong block. It's like a lifelong weight that we carry around that keeps us from rising higher. So that's the number one issue that I see in the collective consciousness that prohibits people from rising higher. It is institutionalized, multi-generational trauma. And on the side of the perpetrators, it is highly tactical. The trauma can be inflicted through physical pain and physical abuse, through psychological, verbal, spiritual abuse, through mass events that happen. People will remember that when they were little children, they will tell you that the assassination of John F. Kennedy and the reporting of that assassination has altered the course of their life. What was it? A mass trauma event. People talk about it in the same way about 9/11, about earthquakes, about anything that has a big sudden impact. And so when we focus solely on things outside of us, we miss the forest for the trees. We literally do. Healing is the number one emotional healing, psychological, emotional, spiritual healing, which is trauma healing. It's not rocket science, actually. There are processes that can help you do that, but healing is literally like the springboard that we all need to rise higher. And I would go as far as to say that I haven't met a whole human being in this life yet. I've met people in various stages of healing, some very, very far advanced and some not at all, but we are all in the process of healing from this traumatizing world and life that we live in. It is designed to keep us in this constant loop. So what is allowing us to break free from the loop, is that we have this knowledge and that we find it and we can see the logic and that we can see the truth in it. and break these cycles. But this is not just mental knowledge. This has to become practical knowledge. It has to become wisdom. Something that you put into practice becomes wisdom. And so this is what is so important. The field affects physical systems. This is the number one message here, and not the other way around. Of course, also the other way around in a loop sense kind of way. And that the effects happen non-locally, which is so beautiful if we think about it, that we could be tucked away somewhere in the woods and still have an effect on everything. So people do not have to be physically present. They're talking here about the random number generators to have an effect on them. And time lag studies even suggest some of these field effects may operate outside linear time, which once again goes back to the experiment I talked about earlier, the pre-sentiment experience, where people already have a feeling, a reaction to something that hasn't happened yet, right? And at the same time, there are experiments like a variation of the double slit experiments, where they show that light behaves differently, either as a waveform or as a particle form, depending on whether it's observed or not. But a variation of the experiment has actually shown that the observer effect can literally change the past, how the light would have not behaved. Very, very interesting things, and a lot of stuff that I encourage every one of you to look deeper into. Emotional coherence is the key on both sides, either negative or positive. On the negative side, it's fear, terror, worry, doubt, right? Those negative emotions. And the more people that they can put in a state like that, the better for them. That's why these mass rituals, that's why you have these huge Olympic games, the opening ceremonies that show dark images that convey a sense of, sort of dark music. All of pop music is under, most of pop music that's pushed into the mainstream is under 200 on the Hawkins map of consciousness, on the scale that goes from 0 to 1,000, is under 200. That's what they're pushing onto the people. Most of the movies, most of the TV shows are. That's why people feel drained as they watch them. And why are they so excited about millions of people watching the same show on the same day when it drops on Netflix or Prime? Why? Because they know they can get millions of people into a certain state of consciousness at the same time, which allows them to further their dark projections and visions for the world. To them, it's a science, and to us, we're, and that's why they've hidden this from us, because they know how to use it against us. And we have to, in a radical and fast way, begin using it for the good, for love and unity and harmony, and a complete, loving, harmonious takeover of the projection into the future. So it's not just about attention. It's the unified emotional attention that literally matters the most. So what can we do? And this is not hard. Coherence means that you bring everything in a state of balance and connection. So often we are, and we consist of multiple parts, if you will. We have a physical part, we have a mental part, we have a spirit part. And when those parts are out of sync, we can't project a beautiful, loving energy. How do we bring those parts into sync? It's not hard. If you sit down in the morning or whenever you feel like it, and you sit down and you take 30 conscious, deep breaths, there is not a snowball's chance in hell that you will not feel more balanced and more coherent afterwards. It's as simple as that. When you focus on something, on an image or a sound that brings you peace and harmony, you focus on that for a few minutes, it changes literally the biochemistry in your body, and it changes your output into the world. So whether that's, you call it prayer, meditation, peacetime, breath work, the name does not matter. What matters is that we actually show up for it, that we actually focus on it. And you could be just sitting under the tree and focus on how the leaves are moving in the wind. whatever does the trick, really not as important. Of course, when you start doing this on a synchronized level, when you bring people together, small group, 3, 4, 5 people, we all know the power of group prayer. We all know the power of group meditation. We've been asked many times, why don't we facilitate digital group meditations? And I've said it before, I'll say it again. When you project this out into the open internet, the watchers, there are entities constantly watching and observing these fields. And in a digital group meditation, they interject themselves and begin sort of harvesting that energy and turning it upside down often. And that's why we see the effects of online group meditations are much, 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 much smaller than in person. And we simply don't trust, unless we have our own watchers in the field who can see these disturbances on an energetic level and interfere and prevent them from happening. But we have seen the incredible positive effects during our retreats when 35 people in a room meditate together. And we have measured the effects where we were going to this place, a random building, quite nice, but nothing special. That was at a certain level of consciousness. And if I'm not mistaken, before we arrived there, it was somewhere in the 350 or 360 region, 360 on the Hawkins scale of consciousness. During our meditation sessions in that room, the peak levels that were measured were above 900. That's what happens when 35 people, some of whom are not experienced meditators, were simply guided into a deeper state of coherence. When 35 hearts and minds align on a frequency level, the level of consciousness of the field was raised to 900. Now, how do you believe has that affected the surrounding area, the people that live there, the people that walk into that field? In a very, very positive way. Now, if we think about what would happen, if every city, every urban area had a few of those groups, how many would be needed? The general idea that was given by Maharishi and others who've studied this is that it's the square root of 1% of the population. Now you do the math. The square root of 1% is virtually nothing. So this is one of the recipes, and the most potent one, because it doesn't require money. It doesn't require infrastructure. It doesn't require a lobby. It doesn't require anything material other than people having the will to do it. Do it individually, do it together as couples, do it together in groups. And I would encourage you all to focus simply, right? The practice of transcendental meditation is one. There's other meditations, but the focus is simple. The focus needs to be on coherence and peace more than anything, right? It's that energy. And last but not least, I want to share a story of how powerful consciousness fields really are. And how we can use, or we at least use, a support system. 2 days ago, for those of you who live in the United States, maybe the Midwest, the southern regions, there was a massive storm and tornado system coming through 2 nights ago. And it was an early night for Christine and I. We were tired and went to bed at 10. Knew the storm was coming, so we were sort of prepared, but we heard the sirens at around 11 and phone alerts and everything went off. We kept it on because of that. And the tornado sirens came on. And so we gathered the family in the safest place in our house. And I pulled up the live stream of some local meteorologists who all streamed from their houses locally. And so they were really good about tracking that thing on the radar and talking about it. And they were showing, the different systems that were close to each other. And this one guy said, while the storm system was some 30 miles west of us. He said, now look at these two dots. He showed them on the radar image and said, if these come closer to each other, they have a high potential to create a tornado rotation. This is very dangerous. So, we were tracking this and sitting here and still very calm. And as it came closer, he said, our worst fear has come true. These dots have connected, and there is now a tornado rotation system. And that was literally 15 miles, 20 miles away from us. So it was all code red. Everybody put their helmets on, like get in the safest space of your house. There's a tornado or multiple tornadoes, and we fear touchdown. We felt very protected. Christine did turn on a boost on our FLFE service. I'll talk about that in a moment, what that means. And basically, the guys on TV, a few got up because they had to wake up their family, get them to a safe space. But they were literally showing that this storm system, this tornado system, was going straight for the area that we live in, like straight, dead center, bullseye. And so this thing moves, and they're getting more and more nervous. And as it comes about 5 to 10 miles is away from our house, the guys started saying, well, hold on a minute. Something weird is happening here. Hold on, something weird is happening here. The system moves closer, and he says, this is strange. This is all of a sudden dissipating. It's dissolving. He's never seen anything like it. The storm literally started weakening. He said, I don't understand this. All the parameters show me that this should intensify now, that this should further intensify, but it isn't. It's dissipating. And then, we were sort of told that hail was going to come, baseball-sized hail and whatnot. He said, and the hail potential is coming down too, and he's never seen anything like it. By the time that this system had come to our area, it was lightning, thunder, rain, and I would say maybe 20 to 30 mile winds tops. That was it. It was a good thunderstorm. That's what it was by the time that it had come here. Now, I'm not going to make a claim. I'm going to give you my opinion. And what we've now heard from so many others is what I believe happened is that the consciousness field, specifically that is maintained 24/7 through the service of FLFE, has literally weakened the storm when it came in touch with it. That's literally what I believe happened. And this is what many people tell us. We have many testimonials. Now, I would never claim that is the truth, or FLFE, they would never claim that their service can do that. That's just experience. People have talked about how fires turn away or stop, or and when you, for example, during such a storm, many people have had that experience, are in prayer or meditation as a group or a family, that you achieve very similar effects. So what this shows us is the incredible effect that we are having, our consciousness is having, and the field is having on anything that we might get in contact with. Now, the beautiful thing and why we love this service so much, the FLFE service, is because it is supporting humanity during this time of raising consciousness 24/7. While you sleep, while you work, while you eat, it is always on. And that's a service that I can't think of anything that's, more important right now. So that's why we love sharing this. And if you want to learn more about it or give it a try, free trial, just go to highconsciousnessfield.com, learn more, tune into it, feel your way through it, just see if this is something that you might want to try out. Again, I'm not saying, hey, when you put that service on your property, all storms will stay away. I'm not saying that whatsoever. I'm just sharing our experience and what others have been saying. The main effects that this is having is through a higher level of consciousness, a field that is maintained around your property, you feel more coherent naturally. It's easier. Communication gets better in the field. Plants grow better. Animals feel better. Forgiveness is easier. It's just like a leg up, if you will. So, just wanted to share that. But whether you have such a service or not is, that's not the instrumental part. That's a support system. You are the one, and your intention is the one. And whether we look at war zones, conflict, political conflicts, all the crap in the world, why isn't anyone on those screens talking about this? Why isn't there like a big fuss being made about this, where people say, hey, what if we just for 10 minutes got in a really beautiful space together, played some really nice calm music, and just breathe together for 10 minutes? Let's see if we can find greater peace here. And they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to tell you about it. It's literally on the list of forbidden subjects. So you, me, we need to talk about it. We need to teach each other. We need to share with each other. We need to bring this information out to the world. That's one of the most important things we can do today. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. We love you. We appreciate you. And we'll be back with you again very, very soon.
Listen, right now you could be only a few clicks away from experiencing something amazing, something that has changed thousands of lives all over the world. I'm talking about a high consciousness field similar to those at pilgrimage sites and sacred places. It's where people go to heal, to connect, and to become the best possible version of themselves. With FLFE, you can bring such a high consciousness field into your home right now. It's a spiritual quantum technology based on the work of Nikola Tesla. Better sleep, more energy, greater well-being, improved finances, electrosmog mitigation. These are only some of the things people on the FLFE service are experiencing. Try it now for 15 days completely free of charge, no credit card needed. Just click on a link down below to start your free, no strings attached FLFE trial right now.